Hello, welcome to another Burgundy with Tweedy video. Today, a more recent vintage of a wine I have featured before. This is a Gevrey Chambertin from a producer called Henri Richard. I think I said before I wanted to pronounce Henry Richards, a la My Fair Lady Eliza Doolittle. There is a lieu-dit for this, a named vineyard, which is Corve. It was some time ago when I had this before. Previously I had a 2019 vintage of this, and I believe I drank it in a ditch somewhere over there. I rewatched that video and I did have a slight nostalgic yearning to return to that ditch, but it's more of a winter ditch really. This feels like a more appropriate setting for the summer. This is the 2022 vintage. Until recently, I probably would have written this off as far too young, but that run of Confurant Gendre wines from Costco from 2022 suggested to me that perhaps some wines of that vintage are drinkable, and I do tend to like Burgundy to be relatively young and fruity anyway, so might be squandering it, might not. But as always, I mean, the difficulty is just getting hold of stuff that's much older. My cellar is looking rather bare at the moment. All I really have is a handful of Domaine Fourier wines that I'm saving for a somewhat more special occasion. So I had to sort of hunt around some shops in the broader area near where I live to see what I could find. I have ordered another case of 6 from Barry Brothers and Rudd, so that will come hopefully later this week. But in the meantime, beggars can't be choosers. I don't happen to own a time machine, so I don't really have the option of aging this wine that I have bought today for another 2 years and also drinking it this evening. The alternative is not drinking any Gevrey Chambertin this evening, which doesn't really appeal. The wine has stained some way through the cork there. I don't know if you can see that okay. I would say that's gone about 2/3 the way up on one side, not quite so bad on the other side. Hopefully not a problem, but surprising for such a young wine. Sorry, back to the terrible stemware. So this will be just under 3 years old. It is, as I say, a bit youthful for a Gevrey Chambertin, but other 2022s I've had from Burgundy recently suggest that some of them might be ready. I'm repeating myself now, aren't I? It is a bit dark and dingy now. I'm in the shade of the woods, so not easy to assess that colour brilliantly, but I'd say that's middling, not particularly translucent. It's not the clearest looking of wines, so yeah, slightly opaque before giving it a swirl. I think that first fruit note would probably be something like red currant, red berries of some description, but not a terrible version of red berries. This is starting to form a code, I think, as I've probably mentioned a couple of times now. And when I say red berries veering into cranberry, that almost always ends up with a wine I don't really like. But this is red berries with a bit more liveliness, freshness, richness. I'm thinking red currant, but not something as inconsequential as raspberry. Rich, a bit more intense than something like raspberry. Maybe red currant. Bit of a swirl then. I would say a bit more of that sort of richness is coming out. And that fruit might be taking on board a little bit of cherry, but I think we're still broadly in the department of red berry fruit. The ministry of red berry fruit. But it does have a nice richness to it. I don't know how a smell can be rich, but there you go. The smell of rich food. It's not just inconsequential berry juice. And then a bit later, I'm getting a tiny bit of smoke and spice. I remember that from the 2019. That had nice wafts of things like tobacco smoke in it. And I think a little bit of something like that is emerging here, but it's a bit more like grilled food on a barbecue that hasn't burnt yet. Mixed feelings about barbecues. I don't really like the smell of burnt food, but you know, grilled food, very appealing. Yeah, it's got a little bit of that sort of grilled meat, some red currants on the side, possibly even something really rich like duck. Not that I would know, I'm a vegetarian. But it's certainly not giving me any of those notes of green, vegetal, underripe fruit. That is a nose of nice, ripe, rich fruit, I think, the nose at least. And similarly on the palate, nice and ripe, nice and rich. There is again a little bit of a hint of spice or smoke or some combination of the two. A spice rub on a bit of grilled meat, something like that. Not, you know, overwhelmingly meaty. It's a side note to basically this nice, rich, ripe red berry fruit. And then there's probably, in amongst that spice and that smoke, a bit of a sort of tannic tingle there as well. A decent amount of concentration. Good acidity there. No complaints on the acidity front. I think that's pretty nice. One detail I neglected to add is that as I had just bought this from the shop this afternoon, I suspected it was possibly a bit warm. It was actually on the shop shelf. They didn't have one in the back in the storeroom. So I actually stuck it in the fridge for an hour or two at home, and then it's since had half an hour or an hour or something out of the fridge. So it's a bit of a up and down there, but I felt it needed chilling slightly from, it's a relatively warm day and it had been sat on the shelf of a shop. But I'm really happy with the serving temperature now. I think I've somehow, in a very inexact way, ended up with something like just over cellar temperature. I don't believe Burgundy, red Burgundy, should be served at room temperature. I think it should be served somewhere between cellar and room temperature personally, but I know that's much debated. And I don't know if it is just that slightly cool serving temperature, which I like, but that does also suggest a sort of slight minerality to it. Could just be my mind playing, or my palate playing tricks, or maybe because I'm tasting something that has that slight tiny bit of chill to it, which I like. Well, chill's the wrong word, but you know what I mean. Cellar temperature, 12, 13 degrees, whatever cellar temperature is. Not fridge temperature, which is 5 degrees. This is all centigrade for anyone watching from the States or anywhere else where they use Fahrenheit. I'm quite happy with that for something that was just a shop purchase and not a carefully considered rummage through an online wine merchant, weighing up all the usual pros and cons. Obviously, when you're buying something in a shop, the range is typically a bit more limited and have to accept sort of slightly higher prices. This came in at £69. Certainly don't think that is a bargain. I've had, I think, superior Burgundy, well, superior Gevrey Chambertin, let's compare like with like, at least for under 16 recent months, but that does require a lot of hunting around to find that. I would like it to be 10 quid less, I'd like it to be 50 quid less. That certainly is quite Gevrey Chambertin in style. It's got that richness, that concentration, nice fruit character, a bit more red berry than cherry here for a change, but I don't mind that now and again. Maybe it is veering slightly cherry, I don't know. I fear I have probably babbled far too much here, so perhaps I will leave it there, but that's it's been a success. The 2019 was also very nice. I doubt you can find that anywhere now, and I like that it seems the 2020 and the 2021 have just been skipped. In that shop, the last one I bought was a 2019, now we're straight to 2022, which suits my preferences for vintages perfectly. I think 2019 was fantastic. 2022 is shaping up to, I think, look very nice. The 2 years in between can just get lost. As far as I'm concerned, I think they're a bit of a washout. But that is pretty nice. Well done, Henri Richard, for being able to make something that I think is very drinkable at less than 3 years old from Gevrey Chambertin, and still has a lot of that Gevrey Chambertin style. Far too much babble. I'll stop talking. Cheers.